Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. My name is Jamie Alberg, and I'm the Rothman Chair and Director of the Center for the Humanities and the Public Sphere here in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at University of Florida. And I want to welcome you to the concluding lecture of our annual speaker series, which this year is Page Unbound, Humanities in the Digital Age. We have a number of generous and diverse donors this year to this series, so I want to start by thanking them. The Margaret and Robert Rothman Endowment, the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, Smathers Libraries, this beautiful space we're in right now, the Center for Arts, Migration, and Entrepreneurship, the African American Studies Program, Spanish and Portuguese Studies, the Harn Museum of Art, and the Digital Worlds Institute. And I'd also like to thank, of course, the fantastic staff of the Center for Humanities in the Public Sphere, which does so much to put these events together. We have our Associate Director, Sarah Agnelli, our Communications Manager, Christina Foreman. We have Rhonda Black over there, our Office Manager. We have, where's Noah? Noah, right here. Noah Mullins, our Program Coordinator, and Allison Walsh, our Program Coordinator. Can you please help me give them a warm thank you? Thanks. Our series this year is part of our center's broader Digital Humanities Initiative, which is designed to bring scholars together to think about how digital technologies can help shape and inform humanities research, how humanists can work together to collaborate on digital humanities projects, and just to think more generally about how emerging technologies are influencing our personal, our social, our professional lives altogether. And today I am thrilled to be welcoming, again, the closing speaker, who was supposed to be our inaugural speaker of the series, but a hurricane came through. So now he's our closing speaker, Dr. Alex Keel. He's going to be introduced by his longtime collaborator and friend, I think. You've known each other 10 years, I think.
More than 10 years?
More than 10 years. One of our own faculty, UF's Dr. Leah Rosenberg, who teaches Caribbean Studies in the English department. Since 2008, she has worked with the Digital Library of the Caribbean, that's DLOC, D-L-O-C, to increase its collection and to support collaborative teaching of its materials. The Digital Library of the Caribbean is an open access international partnership of roughly 100 libraries, archives, universities, and NGOs with its technical hub and much of its administration based here at UF. Stephanie Chansey is right there. She's the Director of Operations for DLOC. We're glad that she can join us. DLOC is dedicated to preserving Caribbean library and archival materials and making them accessible to anyone with internet access. She met Alex Keel through DLOC as he serves on its scholarly advisory board and has offered his advice to DLOC for over a decade. So please help me in welcoming Professor Leah Rosenberg. Hold it.
That's good. Okay. So tell me if this is not the right distance from the microphone. I am very honored to introduce Professor Alex Keel, who is Senior Lecturer and Associate Research Faculty of Digital Humanities in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese at Yale University, where he teaches Digital Humanities and runs a project-based learning and collective research initiatives. Alex earned his B.A. at Florida International University, so I need to mention his Florida connections, and his doctorate in English, Language, and Literature at the University of Virginia in 2012, with a dissertation titled Migrant Textuality on the Fields of Aimé Césaire's Galician Synthèse. He has continued his work on Césaire with, for instance, a collaborative digital translation of the 1939 typescript of Césaire's Notebook of Return to My Native Land. More recently, in 2024, he had published a bilingual edition of Césaire's Galician Synthèse, and the Dogs Are Silent with Duke University Press. Written during the Vichy regime in Martinique and lost until Alex found it among the translator's papers in 2008, the play dramatizes the Haitian Revolution and the rise and fall of Toussaint literature. It constitutes a significant addition to Césaire's oeuvre and to the Caribbean African diaspora literature as a whole. His scholarly articles have appeared in many essay collections and refereed journals such as the French Genesis, the Canadian Review of Comparative Literature, and the Caribbean Quarterly. After completing his PhD, he took the position of digital scholarship librarian at Columbia University Libraries, where he worked for the next decade with faculty and students at Columbia and far beyond to realize their digital humanities projects, including interactive maps, visualizations, online exhibits, and digital editions. These are open access resources using minimal computing to address urgent human and scholarly needs, making use of resources designed in and for the global north to provide information and infrastructure for DH scholarship in the global south, among other communities. And they included projects such as Torn Apart or Separadas, using various interactive maps to expose and intervene in the 2018 Zero Tolerance Policy. And Global Trade Around the World in 80 Days that documents the breadth, the importance, and precarity of DH projects based in the Global South, as well as In the Same Boats, which Alex worked on with many scholars, but particularly Tanya Glover. It's an interactive map of the geographical trajectories, potential intersections of Afro-Atlantic figures such as Canal Brathwaite, George Lamming, Catherine Dunham, and Maurice Condé. After Hurricane Maria in 2017, he organized a mapathon at Columbia that used satellite imagery and open source mapping software to map buildings and roads across Puerto Rico. This inspired people at 25 other universities to contribute, and they created a toolkit so that others could contribute such work in the future. And I mention this because it's kind of what I wanted to mention or emphasize about Alex and his work. That is that his collaboration with Caribbean scholars and scholars elsewhere has built an infrastructure to support Caribbean digital humanities scholarship, pedagogy, and to ensure the preservation of Caribbean literature and history. When he won the Movers and Shakers Award from the Library Journal in 2020, they stated that his work is at the intersection, or he works at the intersection of technology, humanities, and social justice. And so I just wanted to say a little bit about the infrastructure that Alex has worked to create for the field of digital humanities and Caribbean studies and far beyond. So in 2014, he co-founded the Caribbean Digital, an annual conference in Caribbean digital scholarship and creative work that provided visibility, networking, and mentoring for young and established scholars. In 2016, he co-founded Archipelagos with Tanya Glover, which is an open access journal that adds to the infrastructure of that annual conference by providing a publishing venue with review process for scholarly and pedagogical digital humanities projects in Caribbean studies. He is also a member of Caribbean Digital Scholarship Collective, of the Caribbean Digital Scholarship Collective, with Glover who's also at Yale, Kelly Baker Josephs at the University of Miami, Shiloh Esprit, who's the director of Create Caribbean in Dominica and Jamaica, and Naja Rios Villarina and Revesla Gonzalez Velez at the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras. In 2021, the Caribbean Digital Scholarship Collective won a multi-million-dollar, multi-year grant from the Mellon Foundation. This grant has enabled the CDSC to vastly expand and strengthen the infrastructure for supporting DH scholarship in the Caribbean through conferences, summits, summer institutes, grants, and by supporting a wide spectrum of programs at 2 DH centers located in the Caribbean Creative in Dominica and Jamaica, and the University of Puerto Rico's Caribbean Digital. Thank you very much.
I think we can use this for question and answer later. I think I am, is the sound coming through from the mic? Perfect. Thank you, Leah, so much. I need a nap. That is, I think, a good introduction for what I'm going to talk about, because I think you hit all the notes of all the things that I have been working on, except the one that I'm going to talk about. So that is perfect. So we got all of that out of the way. And I'm not kidding. This is like how I organize my CV. It's through 6 areas or themes of activity. One of the Caribbean digital is like a lot. I've spent so much time and energy because I care a lot about developing digital humanities in the Caribbean. And I also work at the day job, what I call the university, trying to do things in my day job so that I can pay the bills. And then I also interested in MSSR, so that's when I do my solo work, like the book that Leah mentioned. I have done a lot of work in social justice and mobilized humanities, like the Project Torn Apart that Leah mentioned. And of course, I'm going to talk a little bit about this concept of minimal computing, of developing technology for the global south, while in the global north, which is there in the background of most of the things that I do. But today, I am going to be focusing on the 6th thing that I do, or that I'm interested in, what I call the broken record, or another way of saying is the totality of all human knowledge on the planet. So that's what we're going to be talking about. It is the first time that I actually give this particular talk. I never write my talks, so I don't have time. I'm busy doing all these things that you heard about. We're going to play like this. Set a timer for 50 minutes. Brilliant. So after 50 minutes, my phone will let me know that I should shut up so that we can have a conversation. If this didn't ring, I could talk, trust me. I could keep going. But this will let me know that maybe it's time for us to just make it more dynamic, right? So this particular talk is going to be based on a course that I'm teaching at Yale University with my colleague Ayesha Ramachandran, a specialist of the early modern period, called From Columbus to Google, A Critical History of the Archive. And I think that's actually very close to what the title of the talk today is that we're using. Any of you want to look at that syllabus at the end of the talk, let me know. Happy to share. I can give you the link. I put the syllabus up. The syllabus is up on a shared Google Drive. Happy to share with anybody who is curious about how to set this up in the classroom. So some of the things I'm going to be talking about are some of the motivation for doing the course, sort of our approach, which we think is pointing in new directions, and also some of the lessons learned, or some of the interesting topics that have come up in the class. The class itself is a combination of undergraduates and graduates, mostly graduate students, but there are some brave undergraduates there that have joined us in this adventure. So I am going to mostly organize, since I don't write, I need to have some kind of outline. So I share that outline usually with my audiences and publics when I'm doing this, so that you guys more or less, we can keep each other honest, keep me honest. Here's more or less the outline of what I'm going to be talking about today. And I'm going to be riffing off, I'm going to be playing my music out of the outline itself. And we're going to start by defining our terms. Eventually, we're going to talk about different possibilities, and we're going to focus on 2 or 3 examples. And I am going different possibilities for approaches to the history of the archive. And I'm going to be using a couple of examples, very pinpointed examples to illustrate. And then we will transition to question and answer conversation. Sound good? So we go on this journey together. First, let's define our terms. Architectures of knowledge is a concept, you find it in the title, it's a concept that I care a lot about. So I have to elaborate for you what I mean. The general thrust of the way we're going to do this in the next 45, 50 minutes before the Q&A is that I'm going to be leaning on the genealogical approach. Of all the possible approaches to the history of the archive, I'm going to be leaning on this particular model of genealogy. And let's put it in contrast to an archaeological approach. And I'm riffing on those of you who have read Michel Foucault will recognize right away these 2 kind of modalities. A genealogy starts from the present and goes to the back to see how did we end up where we are. How do we end up with archives and libraries being this particular way? You look at it, single things within libraries and archives, and you start pulling at that thread in the past to see how we ended up here. So that's the approach I'm going to be leaning on today. An archaeological approach is, let's go back 500 years and let's see what's there. And then build from there towards the future, because there are some things and some threads that die out, right? So I might touch, depending on time, on some threads that died out that might be coming back. But for the most part, we're going to be going from the present backwards. All right? So, so let's start with the present, where we are today. And let's try to define architectures of knowledge in terms of where we are in 2025. So I am going to do this first by going around the world. I'm going to use this map that I just found to give us a little visual, aid to more or less discuss what's going on with the production of knowledge in the world today. Okay? So this will be our first way to start latching on to this idea of an architecture of knowledge. All right. Most of the world's knowledge today is actually produced in the North Atlantic world and in China. Starting in the top left here, the North Atlantic world, what we have is a series of companies that control most of the knowledge production, both scientific and humanistic. Now, you guys know about primary sources and secondary sources, right? You've heard about this. So secondary sources are articles that we produce, are books that we produce. And the primary sources are those cultural artifacts, historical artifacts that survive from the past that we study, at least in the humanities. In science, it's a little bit of a different conversation, but they do produce literature, a lot of conference papers and a lot of scientific papers. So there are about 5 monopolies that control most of this production. Now, I'm going to focus on a particular one that you may be familiar with. I'm assuming that most people here in this room are humanities people. So there's a company called ProQuest. How many of you have heard of this company, ProQuest, right? So you've heard of this company, right? So this company is a middle layer. They're not even like one of the top companies. They're just a subsidiary owned by a larger company that sells business intelligence. And that company, I think, is called Cengage. What is Cengage? Yeah, Cengage. Yeah, they sell business intelligence. And they use a technology called open linked data to actually be able to extract information from large bodies of knowledge in order to sell it to businesses and finances. These are companies that are at heart become tied to what we call the private equity sector, right? Cengage itself was formed out of several private equity moves buying smaller companies, a phenomenon that we're familiar with since 2008, I hope. Now, these companies like this, for example, own all of the theses, all of the master's theses and dissertations produced in the United States of America. So are there graduate students here in the room? Yeah, you will notice you will realize really quick when you finish your PhD and you're about to turn it in that before you get your degree, you have to submit it to ProQuest. And that you won't be allowed to graduate unless you submit it. And if you are as cynical as the Philadelphia International University crew that manages this, you would actually have to pay $600 in order to have the right of them owning your stuff. That's because they own a thing called dissertation abstracts. Don't get me started. There are some librarians in the room who are like, yeah, we know this. Librarians get to see this directly. Now, anyway, so this is a typical company of like subsidiary of a larger company, and there's like 5 of these, and these are companies that make, let's see how much Cengage valuated at. What is the valuation of Cengage? $1.5 billion. All right, so the people who own most of the knowledge are billion-dollar companies. This number is about to increase. This number has increased. This number has increased continuously since the 90s until the present. It's about to increase because they are also sitting on the largest amount of data they can sell to AI companies. So that's something also we didn't see that one coming, but there it is. Now, all of this sudden, the humans, who owns the data of human knowledge production actually becomes even more important because of AI. So billion-dollar companies, these are people that don't hang out with you. They don't hang out with faculty. They don't hang out with librarians. They hang out probably in Mar-a-Lago down there playing golf and drinking wine and cheese because they're billionaires. So these people, where's my map? Where's my map? There it is. So these people operate mostly in the North Atlantic world. This also happens to be where most of the knowledge is produced, the best universities or the largest amount of universities producing knowledge, producing books, producing articles that these companies absorb, right? Libraries like the university, like Mathers Library, like where we are right now, license the data from these companies so that faculty and students can have access to it. Kind of like a Netflix account, but for knowledge. Back in the day, libraries used to buy this stuff, but these companies figure out that the Netflix model works a lot better a long time ago. So now they just let you rent the knowledge for like a year at a time. And libraries have very little choice because the students and faculty want access to this stuff, right? All right, if you move, let's move to the right. We arrive at Central Europe and Eastern Europe, the remnants of the Soviet bloc, the fallout from the collapse of the communist empire, trying to regain some of that territory in Russia. But there it is, people who actually got used to the idea that knowledge was common property. We can even bring it a little down to Central Asia too. And we land in the world of pirate libraries. These pirate libraries, and I pulled up here, I apologize if you get a call, whoever invited me, Jamie, if you get a call for why were we using Library Genesis in this talk. This is an example of a pirate library. Now, these types of libraries are used, they're produced by people in Central Asia and Eastern Europe. There's not the only one. There's LibGen, but there's also Sci-Hub, there's Anna's Archive, the World's Archive. There's several pirate libraries that are usually administered by like 5 PhDs. And it's usually, like, this is amazing because we spend so much money trying to do digital collections here because of this arrangement, deals and licenses. These people, five people who are also busy doing the research, they're running these libraries, and they're sometimes larger than what you can produce in any given library. They're definitely, most of them larger than DLOG, for example. And they're run by 5 people. 5 people who we could call digital humanities scholars because they are mostly from the humanities and they know how to code. In fact, we actually know most of these people because for the past 10 years, we've had this series of conferences or meetings that we call the Architectures of Knowledge series that me and Dennis have been running, and where we go to places with non-extradition agreements in order to hang out with the pirate librarians. So with the first one was in Mumbai, we've been to Pakistan. I think next one up we're going to Kyrgyzstan. We have to go to places where there are non-extradition agreements because the rich people are looking for them. The Interpol is looking for these people to arrest them. So these people cannot come to the United States. Many of them are sought by international police because the rich people are pissed. Anyways, I won't run a search so that, say that we were trying to get. But if you do want to find something that you can't afford, it's perfectly illegal for you to actually go in there and look for the thing, and like a book that you're in a class and you can't afford it, you go in there and you will be breaking the law and getting your PDF of that text. Okay? All right. And I, of course, do not support breaking of the law. But because in Africa and South America and a lot of parts of Asia, people cannot afford the stupid prices that these North Atlantic cartels are setting on knowledge production, they are using these libraries. Interestingly enough, actually, so are our graduate students in the United States, because graduate students are broke, too. And actually, most of the actual uploading of these things happens through graduate students in the United States, because there's a concept of leeching, so you don't want to be a leech that is operative in that world. If you're taking, you want to give back. So how do you give back? The one book that you get from the library, you scan and put it. Sometimes it's funny to find, like, because in the scans you would notice a call number or something. You can tell what library it came from. Like, but anyways. I personally was always checking. My books are there. My stuff is there. Because people are complaining about this all the time, and I'm like, if I'm not there, I feel left out. I'm like, nobody cares about my scholarship. Why hasn't a graduate student uploaded it? My stuff is there. All right, let's go now to let's calm down. You're starting to get a sense, I hope, of the extent of knowledge production around the planet. This is important for some of the other concepts we're going to develop, because remember, this is after all about history. How did we get here? China. They are the second largest knowledge producers in the planet right now, about to overtake the United States, which is number one. If things keep going the way they are, and it looks like they are going the way they are, China will probably be producing more knowledge than the unit, both scientific and historical, and the social sciences. They will be producing more knowledge than the United States within the next 5 years, if not sooner. They're very close. There's, of course, some, in terms of the architecture we're trying to map out here, there are a couple things worth pointing out about that massive production. It is not being produced in the same way that it's being produced by the North Atlantic cartels. There are no massive billionaire companies that produce it. This is all state-funded. When we try to access it, we will have some obstacles. One, even though most Chinese people in the academy speak English, most academics in the English-speaking world do not speak Chinese. So that knowledge production is invisible to most people around here. Kind of like sad that we don't have more young people learning Chinese, so they can tap into that rich tradition, into that rich knowledge production that is happening right now. The other part is, of course, firewalls. And of course, their knowledge production there is shaped a lot by state controls and limits over what you can say. But so apparently it's going to be here the case in the United States. So at least it will be the same, at least when it comes to that. All right. I want to skip Australia and Southeast Asia because I just don't know that much about it. Australians are mostly participating in North Atlantic economies because they were like this British people got lost and ended up there. But in India, we have the reason why we went to Mumbai to do this, to do our first meeting of the knowledge, Architectures of Knowledge series there, is because they have a rich tradition also of not obeying copyright law or patent law. And in fact, when they became independent, they understood that in order to bring medicine to their people and to bring knowledge to the people, they have massive countries, second largest population on the planet. They couldn't, at that particular moment, sign up to the Berne Convention, which is the international convention that most countries abide by for copyright, or any of the other conventions that protected patents and things like this. They needed to actually go their own way. And they resisted. It was only until recently that they signed up to the Berne Convention. But they resisted all this time. So they developed a society in which copying of knowledge, no matter where you find it, was typical and the norm. That actually still is very common in India. You go to India and you will find like libraries, like you go to the Mathur's library there, it will be like a bunch of like photocopies of books bound in brown bag paper which is something from the Caribbean. Those of us in the Caribbean, that's what we did as kids. We would create books by making photocopies and binding them. We know how to bind it with cardboard and brown bag paper from the store. And those would be a book, and we write in the side the name of the book. And you would still find those in libraries over there. So it's a great place to study to talk about these things. I'm going to skip the Middle East for now, just for time's sake. We go to sub-Saharan Africa. We see there the collapse of a knowledge production that was autochthonous that had its height during the 70s and 80s. In post-colonial Africa, after the independence movements of the 60s, we have state-subsidized university presses that start popping up everywhere. In West Africa, Central Africa, at all the universities, University of Khartoum, University of Lagos, all of these universities are producing knowledge, African knowledge, born and raised there. It was very important for them because they had suffered for so long being the object of study rather than their own producers of knowledge. Sadly, because of neoliberal pressures, global commerce, copyright law, etc., eventually that industry collapsed. Also because obviously the growing pains of post-colonial societies, dictatorships, and all these kinds of stuff, and censorship eventually killed that industry. And right now you have a bunch of colleagues down there who actually must publish with the North Atlantic cartels in order to get recognition at home. And then finally we arrive in South America, where we still have the largest open access, open source movement in the world today, subsidized by the state. Most universities in South America and in Central America, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, are still heavily subsidized by the government, and so is their knowledge production. So you have things like Cielo, Redalic, which are these databases like DLOC, where you can find their production, and it's open access. Why? Because they still have government support. Sort of like the legacy of socialist Latin America. All right, that concludes more or less our trip around the world for how knowledge is being produced. Let us keep that in mind. Let's sit there with that for 1 minute. So you have a sense of what the world looks like more or less in terms of what is being produced right now. We're still not there yet about how libraries collect not only what is being produced right now, but also what has been produced over the years and accumulated in their libraries, right? We're going to get there in a second. But I just wanted you to have that sense of the present, okay? So I want you to don't close your physical eyes. Close your mind's eyes. And imagine the totality of human knowledge today. First, as Borges would say, it is not an infinite number of things. There's not an infinite number of books out there. There's not an infinite number of essays. It is a finite number. But like swallows flying in the sky, it is a finite number that is very hard to count. It is also a finite number that is changing constantly. Books are disappearing, being burned, destroyed, forgotten, destroyed by hurricanes, and new ones coming in. And so are articles. Now, add to that vision that you have, I hope in your mind's eye, now you have like there in the world, there is a totality of actual artifacts. Add to that now data. Because a lot of the knowledge we produce today comes in the form of bytes. So that one is also really hard, but it's not infinite. There is a finite amount of bytes. A byte is the smallest unit of information, right? Usually we're talking about 8 bits, right? 8 switches of on and off, ones and zeros. Each of them one letter. Letter A, letter B, whatever. Each of them one little byte. There's even images are made up of bytes, made up of symbols. There's a finite number. It's huge. And it's constantly changing, but it's finite. Okay. Now, this is where my students, they really trip out on this one. What if I told you that there is no corner of this planet that hasn't been touched by human activity. Of that there is actually very, very small. That actually human culture has actually shaped the world around us to the point where the planet itself is an archive of human culture. Species themselves have been affected by us. Plant life has been affected by us. The weather systems and patterns have been affected by us. That means that everywhere we look, we have evidence of human activity, in a sense, giving us a different kind of vision of the totality of the record of humankind, of what we have done. Now, let's put a limit there. Okay, that's the largest image I'm going to give you. No more. That totality is the human, what I call the human record. Now, this is why in my notes, I changed the title, because I remember the title that I gave you. I changed the title, instead of archives, the critical history of archives, to a critical history of the record. Which is this small, actual archivists get super mad at you when you say archive for anything. Like, what's your archive? And I'm like, and they actually work in actual physical archives, and they get like, you don't know what you're talking about. So let's avoid all that, and let's speak of, it's true, it's social media. And people, that's why I prefer also the concept of the record. Where have we engraved our presence, right? And in order for the conversation that is about to happen to stay within the level, within the boundaries of sanity, so that we don't become mad or it's not too poetic, let's go ahead and forget about the nature stuff. And let's focus on the institutions, corporations or groups, human organizations that manage records. That will limit our conversation to the history of libraries, archives, data centers. So we can include these companies that own this stuff within even the pirate libraries. Let us focus on that as we have this conversation about its history. How did we get here? All right. Now it's time to do our first step into the past. Focused on, let's start with the idea of totality itself, of universalism. So the class in this talk is called From Columbus to Google, not because of Christopher Columbus, but because of Ferdinand Columbus, his bastard son. How many of you know about Hernando Colón? How many of you have heard of Hernando Colón? What's going on here in U.S.? Like, Hernando Colón is considered in some quarters to be the father of the modern library. For very specific reasons. I'm going to outline that. So, okay, fine. I'll take 2 minutes to tell you a little bit about Hernando Colón. Little side thing that Christopher had with his mom, and he was born, and Christopher Columbus didn't want anything to do with the mom, but he kind of still did right by the kid, gave him the name, took him on his 4th voyage. So Ferdinand was stuck with him in Jamaica. You remember his 4th voyage that Christopher, you know the voyages, right? So he's stuck in Jamaica with his dad for like a year, and he's like 17 or something like that. Goes back. He loves his dad. He idolizes his dad. Dad eventually gets betrayed in Spain. And everything that was promised to him as el almiral de los siete mares, the admiral of the seas, all those dreams of being the owner of everything outside of Spain, they don't pan out. He gets betrayed in the court. And then eventually Christopher dies. And Ferdinand spends the rest of his life trying to reclaim his father's legacy. And he goes about doing this in the weirdest way one can imagine, how one would try to reclaim an empire. He goes about this trying to build the biggest library the world had ever known at that time. When he came back from the fourth voyage, Ferdinand Columbus goes to Venice, to Rome, to the Vatican, to see how the Vatican Library is shaping up. This is early days of the Vatican Library. This is all new. It resembled more of a personal collection than anything else for the Pope and the bishops. When he's there, he notices that the Vatican Library has these kind of canonical texts, all the Thomas Aquinas, some of the Greeks. This is already the humanist period, right? This is the birth of humanism is there. This is a moment when collecting books is a way of actually getting out of the what we know as the Dark Ages. They're probably not that dark. And he notices that the way that the Vatican Library is going about building their collection is excluding everything else he sees in the bookstalls and the people selling books in the streets. He sees people selling pamphlets, and he sees people selling erotic books in the streets. None of that is being collected in the Vatican Library. The Vatican Library is collecting precious objects that represent the canon. So he says, aha! In order for me to build the universal library, and he used the word universal, I must collect both. I must collect this canonical stuff, but I must also start collecting dissertations and theses or whatever, like random great literature you find on the streets, comic books. I'll collect it all. So he starts doing that. He starts traveling around Europe, meets some of the biggest, some of the most famous people from his time. Erasmus was a good friend. Anyways, the reason why he wanted to build the universal library was because he wanted to prove that with his dad opening up the world to the Americas, he had opened the world to a knowledge that could be universal, and that he was the legitimate inheritor of the human capacity to understand the whole world. And his dad had opened the door and fulfilled the prophecies of the Bible that said that the world, the kingdom of the world will belong to you. So he had this weird religious idea that the Bible had prophesied his dad. That had prophesied that his dad specifically would open up our minds to the knowledge of the world. I did some really twisted readings of the Bible. And that in order for him to prove that, he must build this library that he can then use in court to convince the court that he had the right to inherit and be the possessor of all the Americas. That he owned all the Indians, that he owned all the soldiers, that he owned all of it. So it was the weirdest Elon Musk type, kind of like a weirdo tech bro of his time. Complete fantasy craziness. And of course, it worked out as well as you would expect. He did not, obviously, he did not become the owner of America around that time. But he did actually give us this idea of a universal library, a library of all things. He even started for the first time collecting Arabic manuscripts of his time, something that was explicitly not being collected. He also, I gotta give it to him, he invented the putting the books vertical instead of horizontal. The stacks. So he invented the stacks. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, thanks. It does make sense, right? But people before were just putting the books on top of each other, like flat. And he actually said, well, we can fit more if we... So I'm like, okay, it wasn't completely useless. Anyways, here is a vision. Here is what this is the Escorial library. This gives you a sense of, his books ended up here. So he gives you a sense of what that looked like back in those days. Notice also the books finally arranged in a stack like this. They still hadn't figured out that if you actually put this is also interesting, they figure out that if you put the bigger books on the bottom, and that if you organize by size, you actually can fit more and make it more accessible. Notice the small books are on the top. All right. More importantly, though, his ideas about order and the order of knowledge would have a lasting influence. So once you start collecting such disparate things, you obviously must organize them. This has always been the bane of librarians' existence. You must organize the world, and with it, power and knowledge, just so that people can find books. At a practical level, without organization, you cannot find things. And because of this practical exigency that forces us to organize things, we must also play the risk, or suffer always the risk of ending up organizing things in a ways that can be damaging to the planet. I'll give you a simple example from this period before we come back to the present. Around this time, he needed to figure out how different languages would be organized. He went through several different cataloging options and different models of subject headings. At first, when he started his collection, he started organizing the whole library by author. That it quickly became unwieldy, mostly because there was a bunch of anonymous stuff. Okay, so author wasn't going to work. So he ended up going through subjects, dates, and stuff like that. Right? There are choices to be made. Eventually, the most consequential choice that he made that actually would have dire, violent consequences for the world was the choice of separating things by language, where the collection of French material would be on one side and the collection of Spanish materials would be on another side. Soon after his passing, in the world of Felipe II and the Habsburg Empire, I'm not going to rehearse European history for you, although you should run, not walk, to learn your European history. Especially if you are like me, study post-colonial theory and work in the Caribbean, you should know what happened in Europe over the past 500 years. To sum it all up for you, they started fighting with each other. And these separations actually led to something, to one of the major cases in the history of archives of book burning and book banning and the censorship, which is like about 50 or 60 years after he died, we start something called the 30 Years' War between Protestants and Catholics. And Catholic libraries in the Catholic territories would delete and erase all things Protestant. And the Protestants would also burn and delete all things Catholic in theirs. So Central Europe and stuff like that. So they start a war of deletion. And of course, maybe that order of knowledge that they came up with is not helping here. All right, let's come back to the present. I'll give you a minute to breathe because I know it's a lot. Let's come to the idea of how we organize knowledge ourselves. All right? In a digital world. First, I'm going to quickly describe, I'm going to use this, I'm going to open up, give you some concepts. I'm sorry, this might be a little pedagogical. I'm going to teach you a little bit of concepts that librarians know, especially digital librarians know very well, but maybe you're not familiar with, so that you understand the basic architecture of or organization of knowledge for at least digital collections, which is where we are today. This is your typical digital collection. I'm going to use I'm going to switch to Digital Library of the Caribbean in a second to make it feel. I know, I'm scared too. I'm just going to use this. This is a fake project. This is software that we built in my lab that is used to create these digital collections, but it's platonic in the sense that it has the elements that we imagine are part of all of it, right? So first of all, these types of collections, digital collections, are simply defined, are just collect cultural artifacts. They could be essays, they could be images, they could be sound, they could be videos, and they just collect them. And usually in that collection, we have two ways to approach them. One we call browsing, and the other one we call searching. They're mostly just reverse, they're mostly just flip, inverse images of each other. So with browsing, what we have is usually we start with everything, or we start with a large chunk of things, and then we narrow down. So we go from a lot to a little. And we usually go through from a lot to a little, usually using filters. So this is an example of filter, like just show me the Iran stuff, right? So we went from like all of it to this, to a smaller thing. And searching is the inverse image, which is we start with nothing and go from nothing to things. So for example, in this Iran, so now we have the Iran ones, right? Interestingly enough, in this particular software, it truly is instantiated because it's just an optical illusion. You don't know it, but in my software, all the items are already there. I just made them invisible. Like literally, they're all loaded into memory. Your browser already has them. They already went to your computer. You just don't see them yet. So search is an optical illusion, and that's because people have come to rely on this optical illusion. So I'm playing with metaphors here. But Iran is already there, and there it is. Okay. So usually once you find your thing you're looking for, you arrive at this thing called an item page. Now all of these things, actually, we will show you examples. They're there in DLOC. The same architecture is there. So this is an item page. An item page usually has what we call a viewer. So a viewer is usually where you get to experience the thing you were looking for. It's usually a photographic representation. If it's sound, there's a player, you press play and you listen to it. If it's a video, you press play, you listen to it. But in these types of item pages, you usually will also find metadata. Metadata is just information about that particular item. The metadata is what makes the search works and what makes the filter works. If it's not in the metadata, you won't find it in the search box. Basically, and there are people, they have whole armies of people who go to a school for 2 years. They're called metadata librarians who actually do this, and then we put them in the basement of libraries, usually without windows, and pay them the least of all librarians, so they can fill out these things so that you can find your things. Usually by now, they just go work for private industry for one of these cartels, because they also are in the business of capturing metadata and selling it to libraries, and they pay better than libraries. But anyway, somebody has to do this. Somebody has to add this metadata, right? So you'll find it in these things. Now, let me show you how common this architecture, and it's an example also, the kind of thinking that I try to instill in my students, and I hope to share with you, is that these architectures of knowledge have ramifications that affect the world directly. Let me show you how common this architecture is, this design. I just showed you the parts of it. Now, we find it in the Digital Library of the Caribbean. I'm going to look for a nécessaire. Now I type necessary in the search box, and just the same as in WAX, you will find an automatically generated bibliography of things. A list of artifacts, right? You click on one of them. Okay, persígnate ahí, Stephanie. Vamos arriba. Dale. No le dé mente. And you arrive at the item page. In the item page, you have all the information. And this particular one doesn't have I cannot access the item.
You can. There's the link at the top of the page that will take you to...
Because this is an external.
It's an external.
So it doesn't have the viewer integrated. Got it. Okay, fine. There's the viewer.
I'm working on getting that moved.
Okay. It worked, right. JSTOR. MSSR, sorry, the father of the Negritude movement, one of the most important poets in the Caribbean. You should read his work. There's a great book, translation of one of his plays, recently came out of Duke Press, called The Doctor. Anyways, you get your automatically generated bibliography, and you click on the thing, and you could see the filters on the side, by the way, if you wanted to narrow it down. And then you arrive at the item page, and the item page will have a viewer. There's the viewer, and there's your metadata. All right. Let's keep going. WorldCat, Google Scholar, Google Books. You keep going. All of the pirate libraries, all of the vendors, the ProQuest stuff, the dissertation, all of it. It's the same architecture. The same architecture. That architecture is so powerful that it actually has enabled one of the richest billionaires in the planet, Jeff Bezos, who started selling books using this architecture. The only difference between the architecture of Amazon.com and our libraries, this architecture, by the way, was designed in the library world like in the 80s and the 90s. Amazon dates to like the beginning of this century. So we were there first. We designed this architecture based on metaphors from the actual library, for better or worse. When he designed this, so for example, if I go, let me do it. MS there. I get a list. My filters are here. I can use my filters to narrow down. I'm just going to go to the top. There's my item page. The difference between this and ours is that instead of a viewer, this has a purchase button. Want to view it? Where's the money? Same architecture. This architecture is so powerful too that I actually created the other large technological company that has come to dominate our lives. No, not Tesla. This other little one called Google. It misses there. Now you're like, Google? No, that doesn't. How? How can it be? Oh, here's my search. There's my automatically generated bibliography. And I click on any one of these things, it takes me to a document, to a cultural artifact. A web page is nothing more than a cultural artifact. It is a document. Whatever that is, I'm going there from here. It is not the complete architecture, but it is at least using a very important piece, a very important component of this architecture, which is our capacity to generate bibliographies, something that comes from us, that has been taken by capital to construct some of the most powerful companies on the planet. Make our lives horrible. All right, so architectures of knowledge matter. I hope I convince you that how we architect these things can have impacts on the world. So this is at least one very specific sense of a very specific type of architecture. Let's talk about another. Let's talk about the one that is more linked, more dynamic. Citations, citation networks, where people care about in the academy. Who's citing you? People get into fights about, you didn't cite me. You didn't cite me, right? Or like, you took my ideas, you stole my ideas and didn't give me a citation. This is very common. Academics can be so petty about this stuff. I personally, when somebody takes my ideas and doesn't cite me, I'm like, I get secretly like, I giggle because it's like, ooh, I'm influential. Like my ideas have filtered into the culture. But anyways, we do care about citations. Let's talk a little bit about the architectures that are formed today. And then after that, we'll take them back. We're going to go back to the past. Remember, we're going to be doing this jumping back and forth. So this one, I'm going to use the first big digital humanities project that I did with some colleagues at Columbia in our group for experimental methods in the humanities. This is circa 2015, 2014, we started this. I'm not in the team anymore. The project has kept going with a different team that took over. But back in those days, we got an NSF grant, National Science Foundation, for $500,000 to do this project. We pitched to them. It was supposed to be part of a trilogy that we were going to do. We ended up just doing the first part. If you're curious, I'll tell you what the other parts were. But I was already interested in mapping out the world's knowledge around this time. And in this one, we said we promised the NSF that we would scrape syllabi written in English that were openly available on the internet. So he said people were already starting getting into the habit of publishing their syllabuses for their classes in open venues. Sometimes it was open canvases, like use like open ed tech, but sometimes it was just they would put them on their blogs. There was a lot of blogging back then. And people would put the syllabus for this class and syllabus for this class. So we set out to actually grab as many as we possibly can. And build a database using those. It was also, we were already using machine learning back in those days where before AI became like a famous, like it is right now, we were already using it because we were out there sending spiders or little robots into the internet to bring us anything that looked like a syllabus. Now a little spider has more or less a general description of a thing that you're looking for, but you're not sure if you're going to get that thing. So you send your little spider, says, well, a syllabus probably has like the name of the teacher, the university name, a bunch of text. Like if you find something that looks like that and it's in PDF or it's a Microsoft Word, just bring it. So the spiders go out there and start bringing a lot of stuff. But now we have to clean the wheat from the chaff. So we use machine learning. And this particular time we use what are called supervised approaches, where we have like us sitting in the room. We have a little interface that shows us a document and asks us, is this a syllabus? Yes or no? You say, yes, yes, no, yes, no, yes, yes. Eventually the machine learns. That's what we call it, machine learning, right? The machine learns, and then the machine says, I got it, hold my beer, and then it goes through everything else, and then just keeps the syllabi for you. So at this particular point, we ended up with like 1.5, early in the project, we ended up with like 1.5 million syllabi. Then we use another technique in digital humanities we call citation extraction. It's just as it sounds. It's like, if this is a text that has a list of citations, tell us what is being cited. So tell us who the authors are, tell us what the texts are being there, what year they were published, and that's how we construct this database. By now it's like 17 million syllabi. The people who have taken over have done a really great job. They've continued. And here is, for example, one of the things, once everything is in a database, one of the things that we can do, for example, is do little things like this, do a little analysis, like what are the top 10 texts that are taught in the English language? The top 10, and we get to this list. Number 1 text is Calculus by James Stewart, being taught 14,000 times. One can imagine, right? It's a textbook, it's probably very popular. This is used for like introduction to calculus courses. You'll see a lot, in the top 10, top 20, you will see a lot of manuals of writing. And the reason is because, of course, that's one of the mandatory courses in universities, right? Eventually, you start seeing canonical texts. Back in when we did 1.5, syllabus, Communist Manifesto was like number 4 or number 5, and that was my first encounter with right-wing media. As Breitbart actually published an article saying, aha, we knew it, they were communist. And then put my name out there on blast with everybody in the team, like how we have proved that academics were truly communist, because Marxists taught there, of course, they're imbeciles, right? We all know that this side of the house is full of stupidity. Because if they would have actually just clicked on it, get the item page for this particular item, they would have found all the other texts that are taught with it. And if you start looking at the list of texts that co-occur with Marx, you would notice that these courses in which it's appearing are your typical Western civilization courses. The same courses that the right-wing people tell you that we should be teaching only. Right? Just the great Western text. Well, that actually coincides with what is actually being taught in the United States. One of the things that part of our analysis yielded early on in the research was that America is actually kind of conservative in the way we teach the humanities, even if we're still like social justice. Ooh. Anyways, keep that concept of co-occurrence. It's really important. Because I am going to show you now a different sense of totality, one that is driven by relationality. So I am actually going to open the galaxy. This was one of the earliest visualizations we made. Back in those days, it had a smaller number. It's grown and changed its shape, but it hasn't changed that much. I'm going to look for the Communist Manifesto here. There's the Communist Manifesto. This circle. It's a big circle because the Communist Manifesto is taught a lot. So the size of the circle represents how much a text is taught. So it has smaller text around there. The formula that is being used here is force vector graph. Blanking on the precise technical term for the formula we use. But the easiest way to understanding is that it's using the gravitational formula that we use to calculate how planets attract each other. And so it's using a formula from astrophysics, more or less, small differences. So the texts that are around it are texts that get taught with it a lot. But texts that get taught with it a lot that don't have their own gravitational pull. So if it's a really big text, it will have its own little planetary system somewhere else. The advantage of doing this particular visualization this particular way is that it allows us to see the formation of subfields around given canonical texts. Let me illustrate. So for example, the German ideology, state power, socialism, what is property, all of these things get taught a lot with the Communist Manifesto, but not with anything else. So it allows us to see tiny little slivers of the academy that gravitate towards these texts. But as we start zooming out, we start getting another different type of secondary effect, which is that here's another text, The Republic by Plato. The Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle. So how would you call that archipelago then? If the Communist Manifesto is here and the Plato and Aristotle are there, how would you call that archipelago? We call it maybe Western philosophy archipelago. And if we start noticing the different texts that are taught in there, that starts making sense. Niche. So what happens when we start zooming out then? We start seeing departments in the university. We start seeing the sociology department, gender studies department, public health here, eventually until we zoom out and we see the totality of human knowledge that is being taught in this decade. Neat. Now, you know how they say that no discipline is an island? Yeah, except law. And sports. So, of course, criminology and law here. Completely disconnected from the rest of us. And so it's sports. But the sports make sense. Why would they read Foucault? Just throw the ball past So, though here we see a map of how we connect with each other, how we relate to each other. And how we relate to each other through our citationality, sort of how we cite each other in syllabus, and how our texts appear in each other's fields, and we intersect a lot, and we can draw lines connecting us from different fields. In the natural sciences, the social sciences, and the human sciences. So this is a different kind of understanding of the architecture of the total thing. When I spoke about those big companies using linked open data, this is the type of architecture that they rely on in order to produce business intelligence. They connect things one to another. Artificial intelligence of the generative kind, the one that we're using today, relies on the connection that words have with each other. We speak of semantic vectors. That's one of the technologies that is used. For example, digital humanists use a thing called word2vec a lot, and they were using that even before generative AI thing, which was a way to actually just connect synonyms with synonyms, or things that were like in the vicinity of the meaning of the other thing. We created spaces like this where we knew this thing is probably more likely to be in this part of the universe than this other thing, right? This semantic universe of the relationship of all words to all words is what actually enables AI. The one that we're talking about these days. So this kind of thinking and this kind of architecture, well, how did we get here? Okay, glad you asked. We're going back to the 17th century now. And this guy. How am I doing on time? I should stop. Yeah, my thing didn't ring. It didn't ring, I swear to God. I was waiting for it to ring. All right, I'll skip the liveness. You're gonna love that guy. Yeah, monadology. For the philosophers know him well. Yeah. I'll skip him. He just had this crazy idea about how all of this actually speaks to us. How the totality of human knowledge, and he was also a librarian. He was director of 2 libraries in Germany around that time. He believed that the totality of knowledge actually has a voice, and it usually coincides with the voice of God. You were gonna love that stuff. But I'll stop there. I think you got a good sense of what I mean when I say let's try to figure out to do critical approaches to the history of architectures of knowledge. Now you know what I mean by architectures of knowledge. What are the shapes and forms in which our knowledge is put together in? And also, now let's take advantage of these tools, these digital tools that we have to do things that we couldn't do before. So with that, I'll stop and we can start a conversation. How's that? All right, thank you. Told you I could talk.
We still do have time for questions.
Thank you for your presentation over here.
Yeah,
I'm Ferdinand Columbus from the design department, so I'm really glad to see how you are somehow showing potential of visualizing large amounts of information in a way that makes sense also to understand ourselves as this universal being, which is humankind. But nowadays, we are quite concerned about this kind of mechanistic approach to universal being, which is somehow being exploited by some corporations that have their AI agents. But I don't want to talk specifically about OpenAI because all of them are falling to the same kind of, as you mentioned, architecture of knowledge. You just have a chatbot input interface, and all of this possible zoom in, zooming out, and the possibility of having many views of the same kind of information is lost in this kind of interface. So what are your prospects for this kind of situation? Are we going to get used to these chatbots and forget about what we can do, for example, in Google?
never. No, we are scholars. I think one of the things that makes us strong is our critical ability. And in this particular case, let me define critical, just so that we're clear. I think we can call it what Nietzsche would call the word no. Somebody comes and tells you, this is the truth, and you say, no. Or this is the way it has to be, and you say, no, like a little toddler. And you know, this is what makes us powerful. Somebody tries to sell us some stuff, including like, I expect you to question my stuff. And we say no. And we try to figure it out to see if it's true or not. We test it. And I think that's important. We don't have to accept anything. We don't have to accept chatbots. That said, though, of course, if they become a consumer hit, there's no stopping them. It's also for somebody like me, I'm kind of like still like, oh, what a neat trick. Turns out that you can actually write language that is meaningful using statistics. A conversation that had been going on since this Russian guy at the beginning of the 20th century named Markov wrote this paper saying that, you know, guys, it might be possible to actually generate human sentences by using statistics. And he was, of course, using the works of Pushkin to try to prove this. And nobody believed him. It's like, what a wacko. Turns out we can. That's neat. Whether we need to be the owners of this company to behave the way they behave, that's a different thing. That's a question for law and a question for politics. Whether people are going to adopt this is a question for the market. Us, I don't think we have to accept them. Not in the philosophical sense. Yeah. Also, to be clear, for me personally, the problem is not right now, the problem is not that these things are producing sentences or that they're producing images. In digital, there's a field of digital humanities or a sister field called electronic literature that has been producing sentences with robots for decades. But forget about that. In the Middle Ages in Spain, there was this guy named Ramón Llull who actually did this little volvels, which was a tradition that he Columbus or stole from the Arabic traditions in Baghdad and Christianized. He rationalized them a little bit to produce the possible pronouncements of God. Yes. Mechanistic approaches to producing images and language have been around for a minute. Human beings like their little toys that produce language, and it's just that this one's got really good. Okay, cool. That's not the problem, though. The problem for me is ownership. So, for example, we have a conference called Who Owns Black Data that I'm organizing that's going to be at Yale. This is the second instance of the conference. First one took place in Johns Hopkins University, where we address the problem of like what happens when these companies own the historical past of black people at a moment in which that history is trying to be erased. So, for example, the company Ancestry.com, they own most of the data based on extracted from small libraries of birth records, marriage records. They extracted that data to mostly try to then sell to people the possibility of reconstructing their ancestors. Something white people have had the privilege of being able to do in their family trees, a particular structure of knowledge, for longer. And then now combining with DNA data, then black people for the first time are able to start to try to reconstruct that. Wow, what a powerful incentive, what a powerful product. Except for the problem that these companies are owned by private equity companies associated with Trump. So what happens when they own most of the past? And what happens when they start using generative AI to convince people that their ancestors are this person that never existed? And they sell that product. We have a black community that is cheated out of their past, but we also have a black history that is in danger of being manipulated, of being censored, same way that the Europeans have been erasing shit from libraries for fucking centuries. We cannot trust them to be sitting on top of this memory. Anyways, don't get me started. The problem is, AI stole my book. Like, I don't care about that. I already told you. I showed you the pirate libraries. Like, I want to be stolen. Please stolen. It's not stolen. It's us building a commons for knowledge production. Yes, they took it. That's not the problem. That was what they will do with it at the back end level. Not the product they're trying to sell us, but how they right now pose a clear and present danger to the historical record. In Florida, we have seen the loss of a lot of data already. This started during the first Trump regime when a bunch of us in the rest of the United States had to come in here and save EPA servers. Actually, a lot of the things we talked about this morning comes from this movement within library world to try to do data rescue. This data rescue now is taking place all over the United States trying to recover government data because they're destroying it. They shouldn't own the black historical record or the indigenous record or any one of the records. They can keep the other stuff if they want. Digital Library of the Caribbean is in danger. They don't know it, but they are. And I already told Stephanie, and Liam, if Stephanie didn't tell you, I told her.
She was in the meeting.
You were in the meeting. That it might not be a bad idea to copy that data. Yeah.
I want to ask a related question. A related question to what you were just discussing with your record of Black history and ownership of Black records. We have, like, we've seen this happen before, right? We've seen this happen, I mean, like you said, Europeans have been stealing and embracing history's cultural art, right? Part of the fight with museums right now is about
repatriation, yeah.
Right, repatriation of articles that were stolen, and of course that means that those histories were stolen as well. I have not dug into how people have historically responded to these things. Obviously, there is the, try to hold on to as much as you can and safekeeping and things like that. But do you know of, right, as you're looking at how to do this in a digital age, are there things that have happened historically that you're looking to say, oh, this is the way we can do this, though it's different, but it's coming from the same kind of position now?
And we have negative examples everywhere, right? That you just alluded to. One of the things, for example, that the Black history gives us a lot of lessons about how to deal even with moments like this. For example, just something simple like how we teach in the classroom, right? So now we speak of fugitive pedagogies. And they have come to become relevant. Before the civil rights movement, sometimes you had some kind of district supervisor, some white guy would come into your classroom, you're trying to teach some stuff. And I was talking about this morning, and you had to switch gears when the guy came in, right? Like, okay, now we're turning to page 78, you know, like this kind of stuff. Like we call it like this idea where like when we're being watched, we're gonna look like we're gonna teach sensitivity, but when the eyes are off of us, then we teach those stuff that we really came here to teach, right? So that's a lesson, right? That I draw from history, specifically from Black history, right? Because they were doing that before civil rights. That's kind of like the way you taught in many districts, not all districts. Obviously, there were places in the United States. By then, we had Black colleges and stuff like that. They weren't called HBCUs, by the way, for those who think that HBCUs date back to the 19th century. No, the universities themselves date back to that. That's a designation that comes after the civil rights movement. But yeah, the idea is that we look into those episodes of survival resistance and stuff like that, and we learn from them, right? For me, a lot of like, when I hang out with Jessica Johnson and that crew, the ones who are my partners in crime for organizing this series, we speak a lot of marronage. What does a maroon server look like? You know, like I'm working with a couple of graduate students right now doing a digital map of the history of marronage in the Caribbean. And one of the early results of the research is showing is that the European Empire didn't control most of the territory anyways. They just pretend they did. And right now we see these maps that actually just show a flat color, as if they dominated that. No, bullshit. They didn't dominate all of that. They dominated the cities. They got their cities. But you know, down in the hill, just a few blocks away, that wasn't dominated by them. That was indigenous people, Black people who dominated that territory. So it's a war. It's a military space for centuries, right? In conflict, in perpetual conflict. But also, in the Maroons are interesting. There are no saints in this planet. They're complicated people. But one of the things that is lessons for us is like sometimes you gotta go into the city. So if you're thinking like, okay, how did these communities deal with some of this? How did they get resources? Sometimes they would get resources by going into the city. So it wasn't like they were completely divorced, separate from the metropolis, right? So the empire had fluid borders sometimes, and they would go into the city and get the stuff and get out, right? So it's, to answer your question, people sometimes say, why do you use Google Drive for this? This is the empire. And I'm like, man, Robin Hood, Maroon communities. We learn from the past that this works. We go there, get the stuff, and get out. There's what purity. I'm not a Protestant. I don't have to have purity of soul. I can go in there, get my stuff, come out. Things like that. So yes, the answer is yes. We go and learn from the past of people who have gone through similar stuff. And we apply it now with the new dispensations, right? History never repeats itself exactly. Anyways.
I think we have time for one brief question.
I wish we could talk forever.
What were the other two phases of the open syllabus project?
Oh, the trilogy. We wanted to do publishers, and we wanted to do the holdings of all libraries.
Just small.
The catalogs are digital. The catalogs are digital and usually open, like there's no copyright law for catalogs. Yet, interestingly enough, one of the things that is happening this year is that there's now a fight over bibliographies, whether they should have copyright or not, because of the AI has ruined everything, good under the sun, because, wow, I never saw that one coming. If you copyright lists of text, this whole game it's going to get super interesting here. I doubt it will happen, but it's a fight in court right now.
What about WorldCat? Yeah, it's like, how is that different from WorldCat, the third part?
WorldCat is not a catalog of all. WorldCat is not a catalog of all library holdings. WorldCat is. I know the word "world" is in it. It's OCLC. It does this federated system where any kind of like affiliated libraries send their catalogs to them, and they mash it all up to create this. But try to find that stuff in my country in WorldCat. Go for it. That's the thing, you see, my mind, body, and soul is in the global south. I'm here talking to you, but I was not born and raised there. I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic. I know it's close, but it's a different world. We don't have electricity. We still, in the Dominican Republic, for example, we still have to buy data cards for like, we don't have unlimited data. That's an American concept. American is unlimited food, unlimited data, unlimited, like, no, I don't come from that world. World cat. This is you know, this is a typical European move. This universality. Hernando Colón had like 3,000 titles, and he called his library universal. You know, we know that the most critiques of the Enlightenment are mostly how arrogant Kant, who lived in a small town named Heidelberg, imagined the quintessential man. Going to eat his little German baguette in the morning, thinking that this is a universal thing. You know, this kind of, you reach too soon for totality. It's my understanding of the situation. When I say having all of the world's libraries content in it, at least the one that is it, I really mean it. No WorldCat. The approach wouldn't be federated through contributions by partner libraries. The approach would be scraping. Yeah, harvesting. That was then. I wouldn't do it now, mostly because, for example, if you try to log in into Columbia University's Clio, it's closed to the public. And the reason the IT people there, I work with those people for 10 years, so I don't trust them 100%. But the reason they say it's closed to outsiders is because AI harvesters have shut down the servers. Could be. But why them only? So it's all, if anything coming out of Colombia right now, I'm not trusting. But anyways, yeah, so harvesting right now, sometimes I feel bad now because right now everybody's being bombarded by AI harvesters.
Yeah, it's like, there's an ethical question with scraping.
Right now, sure. I always landed on like, it's fine. Except now it's because there's an added element of like, but you're screwing up somebody's server. Yeah. Before they're just taking the actual knowledge, I have to tell you that I don't care. I come from a country where we cannot pay for this stuff. And I have a mission to teach or make knowledge available in the Caribbean. These are my people. They have to have access to knowledge. So, oh my God, the AI companies have access to, they were going to have access to it anyways because they are capitalist industries that could have partnered with the knowledge cartels that we already sold our souls to 20 years ago. Now everybody's upset because they used LibGen because they were trying to save some money. Anyway, don't get me started. Yeah.
We're at time.
We're at time.
Yeah, so everybody help me thank